Well, greetings, friends and fellow travelers, and welcome to Life Mastery TV, your source for inspiration, empowerment, and fulfillment. I would like to remind everybody that this is a live presentation, so you can participate by typing stuff into the chat, and both Maggie and I will try and respond to you as we can. My name is David McLeod, and I am your Life Mastery Coach and author of the book, A Life to Die For. And this is episode 153, Your Purpose Revealed Through Akashic Records. Now, you have a spiritual purpose for being, something big and beautiful and meaningful that is meant to be expressed and manifested through you, and you alone. Furthermore, you already possess all of the skills, qualities, attributes, and characteristics that you will ever need in order to bring this purpose to reality. If you're like many people, however, you may not really know what this purpose is, although you may be able to feel it inside you, trying to find its way into your awareness. I'm hearing a lot of echo coming on here. I don't know where that's coming from. Anyway, let me continue. So it can be a real challenge to uncover and embrace your true purpose, especially when you find yourself resonating with all of your daily life experiences as if that's somehow meant to be. So to help us understand this a little bit better, I've invited an experienced and qualified consultant and mentor to join us for this conversation. Now, my guest is a certified Akashic Records consultant and mentor for people looking to access their biggest potential. As a passionate author and speaker on personal growth, her mission is to inspire growth in every continent. After a successful 15-year corporate career, she woke up one morning with the sound of Akasha ringing in her ears. This led her to discover the Akashic Records as a tool to unlock blocks and heal herself and others. And this led to her transition out of corporate work and into consulting and coaching, where she now specializes in helping clients with purpose and mission work, supported by her understanding of Akashic Records. So please welcome the inspiring and engaging Maggie Sarfo to today's show. Welcome, Maggie. Thank you so much for being here, and I'm so glad to have you.
Thank you, David, and hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here today, and I'm looking forward to being a part of the show.
Yeah, that's great. Maggie, I'm a little bit curious about this this quite literal wake-up call of yours. You know, you talk about having this dream and waking up with the sound of that word Akasha in your head. So it sounds like it was a very, very powerful experience that led you to studying these Akashic Records. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience and how it got you here?
Absolutely. So for me, that was, as you said, a very powerful experience. But it was also kind of a good line or wake-up call for me. And, you know, thinking back to those days, I was in, like, part of my work that I was doing was not feeling like it was fulfilling for me anymore. But like most people, I had always been on my own personal growth journey, you know, listening to the likes of Wayne Dyer, Deepak Chopra, doing my own meditations. But this particular morning, as I was coming out of a very simple meditation, all I could hear was Akasha just ringing very loudly in my ears. And I said to myself, what does that mean? And why is it ringing anyway? And why would it not stop? And one thing led to the other. I picked up my phone and all I could see was the number 333 showing on my phone in terms of time. And then I looked at my emails in terms of number of emails I have, and it said 333. And I was like, what does that mean? What's going on? And, you know, thank God for the internet. So I just went onto Google and I was like, what does Akasha mean? And then I realized it was connected to the Akashic Records. And then from there, I found a book about how to read the Akashic Records. And I bought that book in audio format. And then it took me a while to actually take this seriously, because it was this nebulous thing that I didn't really want to touch, although I could really feel that there was a big pull from within me to get there. So I remember I used to play this audio in the car on my way to work, so I wouldn't have to do the meditative bit that would take you into the records. So I did that for a while until I mastered the courage to actually sit and then do the meditation and then read the prayer or the code that was in there. And then from there, I was able to access my records at that time. I felt that there was more to it, and I wasn't getting quite to where I needed to be. And so I started researching more, and then I came across the guy being interviewed on YouTube. And he was talking about the Akashic Records and talking about how he's been working with the records for about 25 years. And I remember looking at him and going, that's the guy. So before I realized, thankfully his details were shown on the YouTube video. So then I found myself emailing him and saying, would you like to do a reading or a consultation for me? And then he came back saying, actually, I don't do the one-on-ones anymore because he takes people out in groups to show them how to read the records and things like that. He takes them out to places like Egypt, Guatemala, that kind of thing. And then he said, I'll make an exception for you anyway. So then at the start of January, so this was December, just before Christmas. So at the start of January 2017, he did a consultation for me, and he confirmed a lot of what I was seeing in the records, but in a way was resisting, because it kept saying that the Akashic Records was going to be part of the roadmap for the business that I was setting up. And for me, like, the business I was setting up was, again, to consult back into the corporate world. And so I was really resisting it. I was like, well, no one goes into the corporate world and start talking about things like this. They might think I'm actually mad. When that was confirmed, then he gave me more confidence. He had another book on the Akashic Records with an original prayer that was handed down to the Mayans. And so that hieroglyphic prayer is in there, but translated into English. And so I used that prayer, and then I was able to kind of get more downloads, more information. And then March that year, I then went to one of his kind of retreats, academies in Guatemala, which is where I got certified with a group of 20 other people. So that's wow. The story behind that.
Yeah, that's quite a story. You mentioned partway through that you had some resistance to this at first.
Yeah.
Do you know what that resistance was about? Was it just, this is something new and you weren't quite ready for it? Or was it more that you felt that some part of you actually was actively resisting it?
So I guess it was both. So for me, all my, I was in a time when I knew I needed to move out of what I was doing to do something else. But I knew that it had to be something that I was used to. And so in my mind, I had an idea of what I was going to do. And this was in direct conflict with it in a way, at least for me at that time, my physical mind at that time. So it was part of that. The other thing was even though personal growth and personal development was so important to me, I thought it was kind of my personal thing, my own connection with my God and things like that. I didn't see myself as the person who kind of takes these kind of conscious work to other people. And so even when I understood what the records was, I thought, well, it's great, because I need to sort out a lot of things in my own life. I need to sort out a lot of things in my own ancestral lineage. And I thought that was definitely what I was going to use the records for, rather than kind of taking it out into the world. And certainly not from the perspective of being a consultant and reading the records for other people. So yeah. I think that's where the resistance was coming from.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and I've noticed for myself that a great part of my life, actually, I was very much a left-brained person. I've got a number of degrees, so I've done a lot of scientific type work and that, and so I've been very much focused on reason and logic and linear thinking and all that. And it was not until around 2003. I mean, I started a transition towards personal growth starting around 1996 or so, but it wasn't until 2003 that my whole how do I describe this? My current model of the world just kind of blew up. It just didn't make any sense anymore. And I started to allow more spiritual stuff to come in. But I noticed that during that time, as that transition was starting to happen, my mind really was resisting a lot of the
Yeah.
stuff that was coming to me, as if
Mhm.
my mind was telling me, hey, look, if you go to that, we're going to die. It's not safe. It's dangerous.
Yes.
And it's funny how that happens. And yet here I am. I'm still here.
Yeah.
I still have all the power of reason that I ever had before, but I have much more of a balance. So I have both left and right brain now. Did you have the same thing go on for you?
Absolutely. And I think it's exactly that, is that part of your brain going, well, no, because you need to do what you've always done in a way, because that's where your expertise is, and that's how you get paid. And I think there was a lot of that. And also, what would people think about me? And, all of those coming to mind. So I think it was that kind of logical resistance to something that felt really, in my mind, very nebulous. And to the extent that even when I started doing this work, I used to say to people, like, if you had said to me like 3 years ago that I would be sat here doing this or talking about this, I would have said to you, who, me? No, I'm very normal. And at that time, God knows.
Oh, it's interesting that you use that word normal.
Exactly.
Aha. Yeah. And isn't that what the ego mind is like? Oh, what are all those other people going to think about you?
Exactly. Yeah.
And if we buy into that, then we limit ourselves, we hold ourselves back, and we basically become our own police force. We tell ourselves that we have to follow this line, we have to follow this path, we have to stay inside this room, this box, this way of thinking. And
conditioning.
And it seems really scary to step outside of that.
Yes. Yeah.
But that is where the illusion is. And this is what people need to understand, that all of that is just made up stuff. And you really aren't unsafe when you start to expand and grow and become the fully evolved being that you are meant to be.
Experience life in all its facets, really. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, part of that growth means maybe giving up this purpose that was given to you by society and starting to look inside into your heart, into your soul, into your true essence for what your real purpose is. And that's something that I talk about a lot in my book, but I know that you do the same kind of work and you help people find their purpose through the Akashic Records. But before we get there, let's just talk a little bit about what really is purpose and what does it really mean and why is it so important?
So going back to, as soon as I got certified, as a consultant for the Akashic Records, I had no shadow of doubt that I was getting my hat on the word purpose. Because you can use the Akashic Records for anything. So you will have like medical doctors who would be able to tap into the Akashic Records, and if they were doing like a medical procedure, they would be guided to exactly where the problem is, like an operation, and remove it. But I doubt that purpose was to be the direction taking my work to. So for me, purpose is who we are, is our blueprint, is our sense of being as well, and it's everything we are. It's what gives us the flow, is what gives us the opportunity to experience life in all its guises. And sometimes we may look at purpose purely from the perspective of what we do, from a job perspective, but I think purpose is more encompassing than that. And I feel that purpose is our soul's blueprint, is who we are, is what we committed to come here and be, in impacting our own lives to have a great experience, but also reaching out. So that's the bigger part of our purpose, to be able to then extend to us, to enable us to be part of that jigsaw puzzle, because I think we are part of a big puzzle, and not being able to reconnect with who you are and be in that flow actually denies yourself and others from experiencing what we said we wanted to be here to do. So that's my kind of definition for purpose.
Yeah, that's great, and I love what you said. This is something that totally resonates for me, and that is your purpose is really who you are. And you said it yourself. It's not just something you do. I mean, things you do are expressions of who you are, and therefore they are part of your purpose. Now, at first, I think when we come into this world, I agree with you before, by the way, that we create this sense of purpose before we even manifest in the physical realm. I agree with that.
Yeah.
However, once we come into the physical realm, part of our journey, I think, this is just my little theory, part of our journey seems to be to forget everything. And so the first part of our lives seems to be to wander around aimlessly, not knowing what the hell we're doing, to try and figure out why we're here. And some people are very fortunate to find the answer to that early on in life. Other people, like yours truly, like me, for example, take a long time. We're stubborn, we're boneheaded, we're whatever, and we keep resisting until our lives get so messed up that we just don't know what we're doing. And then finally we say, okay, fine, I give up. I want to know the truth. And that's precisely what happened to me. And I know many, many other people for whom that has happened. Now, thankfully, it happened before I died. So I was able to now at least change and get in connection with that sense of who I am, and therefore with my purpose. So I think that's great. I'm glad you shared it the way you did. That feels very, very resonant for me.
Right. Good to hear. No, and it's true. And yes, most of the time we would kind of forget what we committed or who we really are as we come through. I mean, simple things like even coming through the birth canal can traumatize us in such a way that we forget who we are. And then, obviously, once we land, we have well-meaning adults around us and societies around us that tend to kind of condition us and show us the good way to be, the good way to fit, what is recognized as good in our societies and what isn't. And all of that comes to play in to the extent that we then tend to, there are some people who always have that core. Like, I would say most of us will have that core, but I think is the activation of that core that makes that difference to enable us to either be on purpose or feel like it's not quite working for us. That's what I think I find.
Yeah, I agree with you. And isn't it interesting that the people, the well-meaning people that you talked about, our parents, even even grandparents, have themselves been so conditioned and may not have had their own wake-up call yet. So they're still putting their stuff on us from that place of I still had no clue. I hadn't done any of my work yet. And so they were impacted by my way of thinking at the time. And so I had to go back after I did my wake-up call and say, hey, come together and create the beautiful stuff that's in this world. So, and so, yeah, that's what we have to do. And sometimes we have to do the journey largely on our own. But every once in a while, as you described, you'll have these synchronistic, serendipitous events that happen that kind of just jolt you because they seem to be coming out of somewhere different. And when they happen, all of a sudden you can feel your eyes opening up. You can feel your heart opening. What is this? Yeah. What was this Akasha? What is this 333? What is this? Why is this showing up? And so you start asking the question, and the question leads to the answer.
Absolutely. Because again, the answers are within us as well. It's just a case of knowing how to tap into it, really. So, yeah.
All right. So we have this concept of purpose and how it is it's who we are. And then we also have this idea of of leadership. And I think that's an important concept too, because if I ever want to lead anybody else in my life, then I have to learn how to lead myself. So why don't you talk a little bit about that and how important that is?
Mhm. So when it comes to leadership, and I look at it from the perspective of self-leadership, because being able to lead, being able to know yourself, understand yourself, really enables you to be a better people leader. Without knowing who you are, is very not, you're not going to be a good person leader or people leader. So I think self-leadership especially is really important, and self-leadership is about, again, connecting more deeply with who you are, understanding why you're here, what makes you tick, why you have the passions you have, but also taking that responsibility. So David, you talked about doing your own personal work. And then once you did your personal work, you understand things a bit better, you felt in a way compelled to then share that, to people around you, to at least enable them understand that maybe there's a level of growth within yourself. Now, that is exactly what self-leadership is. You taking that responsibility to be who you are on an even deeper level. And when you do that, doors open in so many avenues for you to then move on to be a people leader. So that's where I come from when it comes to leadership. I think an important thing to notice here as well is how purpose evolves. And sometimes we'll do a series of synchronistic activities or ways of being, and we think that it's not connected to our purpose, but it is. From the perspective of purpose develops over time. That is certainly one thing that I have come to realize. And so when I look at my life, for instance, right at an early age, I used to have like lots of friends who were older than me. And they used to come to me, they would say something, and I would say something back to them. They would talk about a problem that they were facing, and I will say something to them. And sometimes they might say, "Oh, thank you, you resolved that problem for me." And I used to think, what did I say? And others will go away and they'll come back a few weeks later and they go, "Oh, you know that thing you said when I said that?" And I said, "Yes." And goes, "Oh, that was the answer I needed, blah, blah, blah." And I had no clue. But then when I was growing up, when I realized that actually you could say something to someone, like you can advise someone and then you can get paid for it, I had no doubt that that was what I wanted to do, because in a way it was something that came very natural to me. And if I can just say something and people pay me for it, why not? And so over the years, looking back now, in a way, all those things that I did is connected to my purpose now, even though now I feel more in flow, more on purpose. But those things happen for a reason. So if I look at why I spent about 18 years in the corporate world, doing business consulting, sales and sales leadership, you would say, what's that, how is that connected to what you do? But I always felt that even when it came to sales, whereas some people will say, "I'll catch the big fish and move on to the next one," I was the type of salesperson who would say, "I like catching the big fish, but I want to stay around enough to see the impact of my work, the impact of my advice. If I advise someone to buy something, I want to stay around enough to see the impact of my work." So I think we lead ourselves throughout as much as we can, and they all come together to culminate in a beautiful thing, and it doesn't stop. So now I'm saying I'm an Akashic Records consultant, I'm a personal growth mentor, but who knows? And I'm always, now that I've come to realize that, I'm also always open to eventualities and possibilities as my purpose evolves. And I think that is what I mean when I talk about leadership and self-leadership. And the more you are being that, just being who you are, also inspires other people around you, even if you don't directly interact with them from any kind of leadership perspective. So that's how I view leadership in this
Right.
conversation about this.
Well, that makes perfect sense. You've covered a lot of stuff in that little blurb that you were just sharing. one of the things that I heard you say is that the leadership and the purpose seem to go together, and that makes sense to me, since who you really are is what you are trying to express. I'm sorry, Shelley, would you mind turning off your camera, please? Thanks. The idea is that your purpose is an expression of who you are, and therefore, if you are willing to express who you are fully, then you become a model in the world. You become an example of what it means to really stand up and be true to who you are. This is what I call integrity. It's having all your thoughts, words, actions, and emotions all aligned with your purpose. When that happens, you're an unstoppable force. And when that happens, you are what can I say? You are an inspiration to the rest of the world. So it's a beautiful thing. And then you're not actually leading in the sense of deliberately telling people where to go. You're leading by example, and you're leading by service. You're offering service to the world to help the world become a better place and to help people become the magnificent, divine, spiritual, unlimited beings of light and love that they're intended to be.
Exactly. Yeah, and it doesn't come without conflict either, because when you are on that path of being a self-leader, you will come into conflict, because people, again, coming back to the conditioning, people would not understand why you choose to express yourself in your entirety that way. So we need to be kind of aware of that. But so long as it feels right for you, and so long as you are able to explain to people why you choose to be who you are, then I think there's always opportunity to work in harmony with everyone. But it's not to say that it's not to be. But true leaders always come into conflict, and they get the opportunity to also demonstrate their leadership through how they resolve conflict and how they are able to mobilize people and hold their vision for others to buy into that vision and go along with them as well.
Yeah, that's beautiful, and I think very true. Conflict is not necessarily a bad thing. Conflict creates the atmosphere in which new ideas can grow, and some kind of creative flow can emanate. I mean, if everybody agreed with everybody, can you imagine how boring this world would be?
Boring. Absolutely. I wouldn't want to live in that world.
I mean, I don't mind having friends who agree with me, and that's great. We can get along. But every once in a while, the best friends say, "What the hell are you saying? That is complete stupidity." Oh, really? So then we have a conversation, and maybe we argue. We might even get heated about it. But the beauty of it is we're seeing something about each other, and we're getting to express ourselves as who we really are. And as you said, it's possible even in the state of conflict to have harmony. I mean, if you think about a rainbow as an example, in one sense, there's conflict because we have all these different colors. But in another sense, it's harmony because they're all there in the same shape. They're all following the same basic shape. But they're not all exactly the same, and they're not equal. They're they're beautiful expressions of light is what they are.
And they all have their separate roles to play. They're part of the jigsaw puzzle. And, you can't be someone else. You have to be you. So, yeah,
exactly. And of course, what's one of the biggest dichotomies of all within our realm? It's the masculine feminine dichotomy. And I think you and I agree that much of what is happening in our world today seems to be the result of highly masculine, logical, scientific, linear kind of thinking. And if we can start bringing in more of the feminine energy, the softer, the more spiritual, the more non-linear, the more connected, all that stuff, we can bring those pieces together. We can make a huge difference in our world.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And, creation was created in balance. And somewhere along the line, we've been able to just go in one direction. In so many ways, a lot of masculine energies have been in our leadership kind of roles. And I think we're coming to the stage where we have to really look at what it takes to bring us back to balance. It does not mean going all the way to the other side so it becomes all feminine dominated, but it's about really balancing it and bringing it into the middle. And I think it starts with us as individuals. So regardless of our sexual orientation, as in male or female, within each and every one of us, as we know, we have the masculine aspect and we've got the feminine aspect. And it's about learning about these things and bringing them into balance. And when we are balanced beings, it does help in our own abilities to express who we are, in our own abilities to create boundaries, in our own abilities to actually be on purpose, understanding what it takes for us to be truly connected, and also what it takes for us to act in all the situations that we find ourselves in. Because in some aspects, in certain situations require us to put our masculine sides forward. The action orientated stuff that we do, we need to bring our masculine sides forward. Whereas, in other situations, we have to be able to be more nurturing, more receiving, which is our feminine aspect. But, looking at ourselves from these perspectives all go towards us becoming more balanced people and being more true to ourselves and really understanding what it's like to be and express ourselves in ways that also shows us being on purpose.
Right. Absolutely. And I loved what you said. It was very, very important to point out, I think, and I'm going to reiterate that masculine versus feminine has nothing to do with gender or sex or your preference or anything like that. It's just about a certain quality of energy. That's all it is. And all people, all humans, and maybe even all beings everywhere have this kind of masculine and feminine energy. You have the energy that wants to push, and you have the energy that wants to receive. You have the various other kinds of energies as well. So we associate the harder, the sharper, the more edgy kinds of energies with the masculine, and we associate the softer, the gentler, the more I don't know, maybe not direct, maybe more indirect, shall we say, energies with feminine, not female, but feminine. And so, I'm sure you've seen people who exhibit both energies, and you might see a man exhibiting very feminine energy. You may see a woman exhibiting very masculine energy. Yeah. This is not unusual. No. Yeah. And I think that what we're saying here is that our world has unfortunately swung way too far to the masculine side of energy. And so we see people everywhere expressing that kind of energy because they believe that's what they have to do to survive and to thrive in this kind of world. Experience. Yeah,
it's been the experience, because when you bring that aspect of you forward, you get rewarded for it. The person who shouts the loudest gets rewarded for it because their voice got heard. It's not that the person who is not shouting the loudest hasn't got any contribution, if not even better contribution, because they probably thought about it more deeply and they have a really powerful contribution to make. Now, how they express themselves, does not mean that it's not as equally important as the person who shouted loudest. So, so something that I think we're all learning and needs to be brought to everyone's attention more and more. And I think the more we can do our own individual work, it really spreads out into the collective and shows how we impact the world in general as well.
Right. Well, and there was something else you said that I want to highlight, and that is how this seems to happen in many different ways in our world. We seem to swing from one extreme way over to another extreme. And so the question is, how do we bring balance without going way too far on the other side? How do we do that? What do you imagine is the best way to do that?
I think with all of these, it's good to look at an introspective approach. Personally, I went through a period where I felt that I was just using too much of my masculine abilities and kind of to the neglect of my feminine abilities. And I think it's about sitting down and looking at how we react towards things. And for a woman, perhaps you might actually look at how you respond towards things in your life, and look at it from the perspective of, am I honoring myself in both ways? And the same for men as well. Am I just being what they say a man should be? Am I also paying attention? For instance, if I have kids, do I take time to actually exhibit more of my nurturing abilities? Do I take time to understand things from the other person's perspective and maybe read about some of these things? But a very practical way of doing this, which actually happens a lot when I do some consultations with people, some of the recommendations they get would be to visualize themselves, their masculine and feminine sides, doing a merge. And I think that's a really powerful approach of doing this. And the more you can visualize your masculine and feminine sides doing a merge, you becoming more balanced, but you actually ingraining that within you as well. And then you bring it out in the physical. So look at some of the activities you do, and look at what it takes to find yourself more balanced in most situations.
Yeah, no, that's very, very good. And I teach my clients the same thing. The idea is not to abandon your true essence or anything like that, but rather maybe try and embrace something that you haven't very much before. So for me, I think I've always, I've never had a problem exhibiting my masculine qualities. That part's easy. But I've always had a sense of embracing my feminine qualities, even though it may be a little bit, maybe my feminine side isn't as developed as I would like it to be. But I think part of the issue is having that willingness simply to embrace the other aspect that is maybe requiring some additional help in expressing in your life.
Yeah, I think so. And that's why I think that introspection, but also education of what it looks like, because these are very new concepts. Regardless of the environment you find yourself in, whether you are in a personal growth or personal development environment, or in an environment where, the masculine is more embraced, the logical aspect of our brain is what thrives. But I think it's more educational than anything else. And then from there, I think we could also ask the question, what does it take for me to be more balanced? And sometimes the thing that we don't always bring as much attention to is not being able to receive the answers from within ourselves. So even if it's like taking 5 minutes every day to sit, do some breathing and ask yourself, what does it take for me to be more balanced? And maybe ask those questions, what activities do I need to be doing to start to, because it's a bit like rewiring your mind, really. If it's gone too far to the right, you want to rewire it so it's balanced. And so what type of physical activities do I need to be doing more of? For some people, it could take the form of doing yoga. For instance, it could balance them a bit more. For some people, when I was in Guatemala, I had a reading so I did the Mayan reading, and they said to me, just do more cooking.
Do more cooking?
Yeah, do more cooking, cook more food. So it can be more simple than we think, but I think with everything is the intention. So when you have your intention behind something, it goes to make it stronger, and it kind of rewires that back into you in terms of, I intend to be more balanced. I intend to express myself in a more balanced way. And because this helps in my own flow, this helps in my own way of being, my sense of being on purpose. So kind of look at it from different angles, but also having it at the back of our mind that it is not difficult, because sometimes we look at new concepts and we think it's difficult, and sometimes it kind of takes us off from what it really is. So I think simple baby steps, things that we enjoy is really, so look at something you're passionate about that is connected to that side of you that you want to develop, and just make a hobby out of it and just do it, really. So yeah, that's what I say.
Well, I think that's great. And I think one thing that I'd like to add here is when you ask yourself, how can I be more balanced? One of the things that you might consider is, well, if I imagine that I actually have a balance here in front of me, I could say, well, if it's tilted one way or the other, I have two choices. Either there's too much in this side or not enough in this side.
Yeah.
So you can ask yourself, if I want to become more balanced, is there too much of something on one side of my scale, or maybe not enough of something on the other side to balance what I've got over here? Because maybe you don't want to get rid of that stuff on the one side.
No. Yeah. You don't want to. Yeah.
That's right. So you've got to think about this in a holistic way. You've got to think about it as, all right, I really like that quality. I don't want to diminish it. What I'd rather do is bring up more of this so that it can be in balance. Or maybe you might say, yeah, that quality might be a little too aggressive. So maybe I can tone that down a bit. And that brings this up a bit. You see? So it's either or, yes, and. There's not a one-way fits all kind of thing.
Yeah, not at all. And also you are in control. So your higher self is always in control. If you're receiving too much of something, you can just ask it to tone it down.
Exactly.
And bring it to a level.
I didn't ask for all this rain. Yeah.
You know, my 3D body needs to be able to accept it. So if it's too much, I want it to be toned down in a way that works for me. And then you grow into it.
I'm sorry, I just stepped on you there. What were you saying?
No, I was just saying, and then you grow into it. So when it's at a level that you can manage, it's easier for you to then grow into it and keep increasing your own level of growth from there.
Yeah, that's a very good point as well. Thank you. All right, well, we've talked a lot about a broad area of topics kind of related to purpose and who I really am and so forth. Let's talk now a little bit about the Akashic Records specifically. And I'd like to understand more. Maybe you could start just by helping us understand what exactly is this thing called the Akashic Records, and why should we pay attention to it?
Yeah, thank you. So the word Akasha is a Sanskrit word, and it means the ether or space, so outer space, somewhere there in the universe. And in the scientific world, in quantum science, they also have the Akashic field, and that for them is the 0 point. So it's kind of nothingness. So it's something somewhere out there in outer space. And in almost any cultural practice or any spiritual practice, they have their own way of describing what we're calling the Akashic Records. So for instance, in the Bible, in Christianity, they will call it the Book of Life. But there are two types of the Akashic Records. So there's the universal Akashic Records, which is everything and anything. So the concept goes by the explanation that if the whole universe was Akasha, then anything and everything that has ever existed, or any event that's ever kind of taken place in the universe in the past, currently happening in the present, and could potentially happen in the future, is recorded in the DNA of the universe. And then obviously within this wider universe, there is us as human beings who exist in the universe. And so the big universe is the Akashic Records, the universal Akashic Records. And then we have the individual Akashic Records, which you may call the Book of Life, which is your own personal Akashic Records. So what is the personal Akashic Records? It's your own soul's records from the time it came into being until the time it returns. And so when we talk about this, from the time it came into being, it would include like any lifetimes that you have had up until now. So the past, the present, and then the potential future paths. And the future is never set in stone. And so depending on the decisions that you take now, you may take a path, and it's not necessarily the wrong path. You just learn something, you come back, and then you can take another path, basically. So that's how the future is at from an Akashic Records perspective. So in a nutshell, that's what the Akashic Records is. Why is the Akashic Records important?
Okay, well, now before you go to the next part, I want to see
clear enough?
summarize this a little bit, okay? because that was a lot. That was a lot.
I know.
Now, the way you described it, it almost sounded to me like the Akashic Records is like a big giant brain with an infinite number of synapses in it. It can connect any two synaptic things by some various combination of paths. It's essentially all possible experiences over all possible times, places, locations, and whatever else we can imagine, and somehow contained in this, the brain is probably not a good choice of words, but a library, let's say. A library.
Yes. Yeah.
Is that kind of accurate now?
It is.
All right, and then within the library, there's also sections of the library that relate to Maggie, and there's a section of the library that relates to David, and a section for Shelley, and so forth, and for everybody else who exists. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Now I understand. So you can go ahead and continue with why it's such an important thing.
Yeah, and also within the library, there's a session that will probably relate to maybe science. There's a session that will relate to how to create a beautiful car, whatever. So there's certain, specialities involved there. So why is it important? So the Akashic Records is one of the tools, because our Earth's or our planet's vibration is going up and up. Then we are at a stage where the Akashic Records has been kind of open to us a bit more than it was in the past. And so, for instance, you would look at a guy called Edgar Casey, who is one of the original people who were reported to have access part of the Akashic Records, and a lot of what he saw at that time is, happened even after his death. So it's more open and accessible to a lot of people now, because we are more awakening to who we are. Again, back to the purpose. And so more people are awakening to it. And the Akashic Records is also part of people's gifts. So when you go into your Akashic Records, you get the opportunity to really question any baffling incidents that is possibly happening now, that you've tried other ways of resolving, but you can't seem to get the answer to. Normally, you may be drawn to the Akashic Records because that is where the answer is. And with everything, when we're looking to resolve something, it's always good to go to the root cause of that thing, because when you get to the root cause, then you know that you're not putting like a plaster over a wound, but you're actually healing it to its true base. Again, back to the library. So you go to the library, you pick the right book, you find the information, and now you can cure it. But within the records as well, when you ask the right kind of questions, you also get the actual solutions in terms of how to resolve that as well. Some of the questions that people would ask within the Akashic Records would include things like their purpose, or what they're committed to be here to do. They would include things like things that are preventing them from experiencing the life that they know they're capable of experiencing. Sometimes we may have brought some past life vows that do not serve us, but we've just brought it in. And so if it's good for us to release those things now, they get brought forward, and then you're shown how to release that. But also, you're not just releasing it and creating a void. You are actually then replacing that vow with a new vow that you have written now, that is in alignment with, again, your true purpose, or how you want to experience life in its entirety in this lifetime. Sometimes there could be like difficult relationships, which could have a soul connection or soul contract. And again, if you have learned all your lessons, then now is a good time to release that, so you can move on and experience life in a way that is really fulfilling for you. So those are some of the things that people would use the Akashic Records for. Also, well, I did talk about
yeah. I can tell that you're excited about this, and that's great. I love that. And I just wanted to point out, so really, because the Akashic Records is a repository for all knowledge, all wisdom, all experience, throughout all time and throughout all places, really, if you want an answer to anything, no matter what question might come up, you can find the answer there. And that actually makes sense. I mean, you probably can't even imagine the question unless there's an answer for it. this is one of the beauties of the universe here.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to do is, because we're starting to get close to our time here, I want to make sure that we actually talk about how to uncover our own individual purpose. If we're not necessarily clear on it, how can we use the Akashic Records to help us do that?
Yeah. And so you could go in from an Akashic Records perspective, you could go into the Akashic Record and ask a question, a direct question in relation to your purpose. And normally,
what would be a good question to ask then, just as an example?
Yeah, so you can say, you know, what is my true purpose? What did I commit to come here to do? Or you could even ask a question from the perspective of what are some of my true gifts that I can use in this lifetime to live my highest potential, for instance. So again, those are questions related. Questions with a yes or no answers don't work really well. Very vague questions will attract vague answers, because the guides and the masters would deem that as the level of information you're willing to receive. And so asking good questions that are detailed would give you the right answers, or questions that are about how can I resolve this? What is my resources now to resolve this issue? That kind of thing. So assuming we've asked that question on about purpose from our Akashic Records, then you would, in a normal scenario, say if you were accessing your own records, depending on how you use your records, then you would start receiving information in the form of a download, or maybe something whispering into your ear, or maybe you seeing a picture followed by an explanation. So, or if someone, like if I was accessing your records for you, again, was holding space for you. So what comes is what I share with you. But what I find is when you ask a question about your purpose within your Akashic Records, it would come in, but it shows you from an entirety perspective in terms of who you are as a being, rather than this is the job that you have to do. But it's very connected to everything you are being as well. So it will make sense. You would know that you definitely, in your records, you will feel the energy. So you ask a question, you receive an answer. You can ask a clarifying question. Most of the time when you receive an answer, say if it was a word, so maybe if you asked a question about your purpose and the word connection came out, you will receive more explanation in terms of why connection is your purpose, and it will explain, maybe, how your soul has been in the past, what you committed to coming here to do this time, what the evolution of that looks like for your future, and it helps you connect. Maybe you are at a time where you are about to transition, and so whatever used to excite you in your job, for instance, doesn't excite you anymore. It means the new door to the next phase of your purpose is about to open. And so coming into your Akashic Records, asking for this information really, and suddenly you become a bit more clear. A lot of coaches will call it a clarity session. So you become really clear, but you can also ask those questions and kind of questions around what are some of the gifts that I can bring in now to serve me. Really, really does help you kind of know exactly the direction that you want to take. But also it gives you that reassurance that it's not set in stone, and it's part of your learning, it's part of your growth, but it feels right for you. That's my understanding from most people who do it anyway.
That sounds really fascinating. So you're saying that I could do this by myself. Can you give me an example of how I might do that?
Yeah.
How would I? Well, just give us a little bit of an example how you would do this on your own self, and then maybe we can learn from that.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll say there are two main ways that people access their records. So some people would meditate. Now, it's a vibrational place, first of all. So depending on how high their vibration goes, they could even be accidentally flipped into the Akashic Records, especially if they need to receive some information from the Akashic Records. And they will know that they are now in a different state and they receive information. So that's the accidental way. And some people would also set the intention and they will meditate into the Akashic Records. For some people, they will see a physical library. They will feel like they will see like a book. They can meet the Akashic Records guide who will open the book, and they will go to where they need to find the information. you can actually rewrite your records as well. So something is in there that doesn't serve you anymore, you can actually clean that and write what you'd like it to be. That's the power that we have in our hands at the moment. Now, another way of accessing the records, which most people use, because it's more guaranteed to get you to the right place all the time, is like some of these sacred prayers. So these prayers that were handed to the Asian traditions, like you will find, I said to you, the one that I was certified is one that is from the Mayan tradition. And so this is an original prayer. I'm a 5th generation holder of that prayer that was handed down to the Mayans, and that's been translated into English. It's only a couple of sentences, but you find yourself in a centered space, you take some breathing, you say to yourself, that's how I do it anyway. So I say to myself, I'm aligned, I'm attuned, and I'm allowing. And then I read the prayer. Normally when I'm reading the prayer, I will feel that connection, like you feel like your heart center opens, you feel that connection. Sometimes you feel like your kind of 8th chakra is also opening, which is a chakra on top of your 7th chakra. But people will experience it in different ways. It doesn't matter. How you experience your records is fine. And once the prayer is said, you will feel the energy. You can start asking the questions. A very good way of doing it is, as you ask the questions, start writing at the same time. It doesn't matter what you're writing, just keep writing. You will start to see that you're receiving a lot of information that really lets you know that actually this information is not from me. So it's in a way, it's like channeled writing. And that's a really good way. Other times, like, because I'm a conscious channel, then when I'm doing it for someone, I'm speaking with you just like this, but I use all my senses to access the records. It will depend on the person in front of me. So if that person is more visual, maybe they will be showing more pictures, but that picture is supported by an explanation as to why they're seeing that picture, and they really get it. So that's how it works. I can give you an example of that, but I'm also conscious of time.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's great. I appreciate it. And what I want to do is I just went to get your website address. I'm just going to paste that into the link here so people can, I hope this is the right address for you. You can go there, folks, and you can connect with Maggie directly. And I'm sure that there's a link there that you can sign up for, a clarity session or whatever it is you call it.
Yeah, you can have a complimentary 15-minute chat about anything you want to have a chat about. I've seen that Shelley has put some comments in there. She says she's progressed thousands of years into the year 2084. Fabulous. And she says there's no linear time in the Akasha. That is true. And that is why
that's right. I think linear time only exists in the context of the ego mind, actually. Yeah. In the spiritual world, everything is here. It's then, it's now, and it's there in the future. It's all simultaneous. Yeah. Wow. Well, Maggie, it's been a great conversation. We've covered a lot of ground today. And as you can see, we're almost out of time, but I just want to make sure that people have a chance to hear any more wisdom that you'd like to share. So if there's something else that you'd like to close with, or some offering aside from the fact that we've just given your link, I'd appreciate. Yeah, go ahead. What would you like to say?
Okay. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for everyone who's joined us live, and to everyone who'll be listening to the recording. Also, I do have a complimentary 5 steps to develop your own purpose, which is on my website. So when you go on my website, you'll be able to download that for yourself as well. And I hope this really enables you to really access your own purpose in its many different guises. But with this, just know that you are you, and the power is within you to be on purpose every single day of your life.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Maggie, for being here. It's been great, and I just really enjoyed feeling your heart and hearing your wisdom and having that shared here on this show. I would like to remind all of you who are watching to thank you for showing up live if you're here, or for watching the recording, and to remind people that you can catch recordings of this and every other episode that I've ever recorded on my website at lifemasterytv.com. That's life-mastery-tv.com. And by the way, the link that we were talking about for Maggie's free session is the link to her website is on my website, so you can certainly go there and find it. It's not a problem. So I truly hope you enjoyed today's presentation, and I'm just so glad that you were able to get something out of this. In a few hours, you're going to receive an email from Learn It Live to a feedback page. And my request is that you take some time to go to that feedback page and write a review of this episode. It's just helpful for us to keep spreading the word and getting more people out. And if you can find it in your heart to give us, 4 or 5 stars, that would be awesome. But really, speak your truth, whatever that is. And finally, I'd like to just remind everybody about the Life Mastery Mantra, something that I share every week. It goes like this. I gratefully forgive the imperfect being I have been in the past. I gratefully accept the magnificent being I am right now. And I gratefully welcome the evolved being that I am becoming in every moment. So until we meet again, I am David McLeod, your Life Mastery Coach, wishing you love, light, and blessings on your continuing journey. See you next time on Life Mastery TV. Bye-bye.